Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mudlet Creek Garage. In this video, we're going to show you how to put wheel bearings and trailing arm bearings in your Generation 1 Can-Am Renegade or Outlander. This one just happens to be a 2011 800R, but this holds true for any Can-Am with this style of trailing arm. So let's get to work. As expected, first step, let's get the tire out of our way. So now that we got the wheel off, our next step is to get this cotter key out of here and remove this 27mm nut holding the hub on. Next, we're going to get our shock out of here. You're going to need a 15mm socket and your 15mm wrench. So the next step is one you're going to have special tools for. But first we're going to remove the tension or the torsion bar mount. As you can see, this one is actually not fully in its hole, so somebody's been in here before. This face here should be flush with this face. This is going to be your 27mm. All right, so our other side must have fell out. Have to get it all lined up and give me a minute. So now that nut's removed, we can remove our torsion bar mount and we can take a look down in here. So down in there, you can see we have a external snap ring, then we have a special nut, which you have to have a Can-Am tool. So let's get that snap ring out, then we'll go after the nut. Having a good pair of snap ring pliers makes an annoying job extremely easy. So this here is a special Gen 1 Can-Am trailing arm socket. It has 4 nubs that engage with the 4 lobes on that special nut. So let's get that nut off. So some of these come out extremely hard, but these have been apart before, so I don't think they were properly torqued down to begin with. Now we just slide our arm off. And there it goes, ready to get our bearings put. Now we have to get the internal snap ring out. I like to go around with a pick and clean everything up, at least in the snap ring area. And as with the other snap ring, a good pair of pliers will make your job exponentially easier. And a vise would make it easier as well. But I'm doing it right here to make it easier for you guys to see it. Actually, let me fight this out in the vise. As for my press setup, I just have a regular old Harbor Freight seal and bearing press, and we're going to set it up on the press so that way it'll go right through the hole there and go right to the ground. Let's see if we can get her out. Of your 2 bearings, the trailing arm is by far the easiest to install the new bearing. You're just going to take your die, set it on the bearing. After you get the bearing started by hand, I like to give it a tap with a dead blow hammer just to make sure she's in there good. And then you're just going to run her down and in. Now we'll put our snap ring back in. Just so you know, you do want to go through beforehand and clean out your groove just to make sure that your snap ring is going to seat all the way in there. And I like to go around after the fact with a punch, and I'll just tap on those surfaces and make sure the snap ring is fully seated. Now that we finished the trailing arm bearings, let's get the wheel bearings out. So you're gonna start by cleaning this little area up with your pick again. And this snap ring is gonna be a little bit different. This one you're gonna have to use a flat blade screwdriver to hook, and then you're just gonna have to pry. And if you try enough times, you'll be able to use the screwdriver and a pick and get it out. So as with the other one, let me fight this out in the vise and we'll be back. For the wheel bearings, we have a similar setup. We just have same press, but with a different size cup on the end of it. Push this wheel bearing down and through. So now getting your wheel bearing in is a little bit more of an arts and crafts project. So I have a socket on either side of the same height, holding it up from there because your shock mount will contact your press if you don't elevate it more. You could have more blocks, but I do not. Then I just have the die on top to push it in. Now we put the snap ring back in the wheel bearing. There. Make sure she's seated all the way around. We'll be ready to put this back on the machine. Now it's time to install our newly rebuilt trailing arm. So all we're gonna do is slide it on to the front and the rear at the exact same time. Just give it a couple wiggles. It shouldn't need to be forced anywhere. It should slide right together. All right, let's get the upper end taken care of and then we'll come down to the lower end. So to start, we're gonna make sure our threads up here are clean and free from any obstructions. If there is any obstructions, we may have to take it back apart just to clear it out because you do not want to mess these threads up. That would mean putting in a new frame. So then we're going to either start by hand or, well, the nut physically by hand or put it in your socket and carefully start to thread it on, making sure not to cross thread it. Once we have it started, we can take our impact gun run it home till it's good and tight. Now we're going to install our snap ring. And this is another important one, to make sure it's seated. You do not want that snap ring coming out of there. Now it's time to install our torsion bar. So you're going to make sure your arrow is pointed up and this is all slid together correctly when it's flying off apparently. May have to pick up a little bit here. There. Now we have to push the other side in so that we can get this nut started. So this is another, start it by hand and just run it home. Just good and tight. These are lock nuts. So as you can see, this torsion bar did not pull all the way through. Let me show you what that means on the other side. All right, so you'll notice over here, you can see a gap. That means that torsion bar spun ever so slightly in there out of alignment. So we got to get them lined up and try again. So this is what a properly seated torsion bar nut looks like. You can see there is threads there, and that is on both sides. Now is the time where if your machine did have the protective caps, which if you don't have them, I recommend buying them. Keeps all the crap out of here and kind of saves your trailing arm bearings a little bit because those bad boys aren't cheap. Just put that on there. Now we'll get the bottom end put together. Now it's time to get our shock back in. You're going to be able to slide it around the back side of the axle and get it slid in there. And then you're going to want to pick up on your trailing arm until you can get her in there. And I like to just feed it through with the gun. There. Can you guys see that? Let me get you a better angle. Feed it right through with the gun right there. Then tighten her down. So now we're gonna feed our axle through. This is a new axle, so it hasn't been seated on here yet. Might fight me a little bit, but you just need to get it through enough that you can get your splines to start. Put your washer on. Sorry, you don't have the greatest view. And then start your nut. So this nut is a little bit bigger, but we're just gonna run this in and install our cotter key. You do not want to torque these to high heavens. You just want to get them good and seated and throw your key in. All right, guys, so there you have it. That is how you install the trailing arm and the wheel bearings in your Generation 1 Can-Am Renegade or Outlander. The process is actually fairly similar for Gen 2 on the wheel bearing, and the trailing arm bearings is kind of similar, but there's 4 of them. Thanks for watching. Like what you've seen, please hit subscribe, smash that like button. Thank you for watching Mudlick Creek Garage.